Hello everyone and welcome to the Crestron Technical Institute. In this video, we will cover some basic information on how to troubleshoot Crestron AV framework systems. First, to connect to AV framework, enter the IP address of the control system and select Configure the room. When AV framework is first loaded or updated, or you just booted up the control system, you will need to wait for the system to be ready. If you receive an error while trying to connect, this typically indicates the system is not ready yet. Since we can connect to our system, it means that the system is ready. When changing configuration in AV framework, make sure to activate the system. If the system is not activated, the user interfaces, such as touch panels or X panels, will not connect, and you will not be able to utilize the system. When a user interface shows a message indicating that it is disconnected or trying to reconnect, and to check your communication settings, it may mean that your system has not been activated or the IP table is incorrect. There are multiple communication types that are compatible with AV framework. AV framework is a very reliable solution, and if you experience issues, it is typically a configuration setting that is incorrect. The most common communication method in AV framework is Ethernet using IP tables. If an Ethernet device shows unknown or offline, this typically is showing that the device is offline. Since the web interface of AV framework is indicating that the device is offline, check the Ethernet connection to the device. Make sure the IP ID in the device matches the IP ID of the same device in AV Framework Device Management. First, we will verify the IP address and hostname stored in the offline device is pointing to the control system running AV Framework. In our case, the control system is 192.168.2.245. Notice how the IP ID is 04, and this also matches our system. The last piece is the port number, which is typically 41794 for an IP table. Whatever port is being used must match on both sides, the device and the control system. You should also verify that the devices are both on the same subnet/network. Since the information is all correct in our example, we should be able to connect. The reason we cannot connect is the system is offline and needs to be activated. Let us activate the system and see if it connects. Now that the system is online, X-Panel connected automatically using the settings we entered. The next communication method AV Framework can utilize is CrestNet. CrestNet devices also utilize IDs, which must match on both sides. Some CrestNet devices have a default ID, which can typically be found in the product documentation. However, Network Device Tree View, a tool found in Crestron Toolbox, can be used to configure and change CrestNet IDs. CEC is two-way serial control that is built into HDMI. This is another form of communications that AV Framework supports. To utilize CEC, it must be enabled and compatible on the device you are trying to control. You will need to pick the default input and the HDMI port that will be used to send the commands. In this case, we have selected the HDMI output of our switcher, and that is physically connected to the display we want to control via CEC. For serial control, the communication settings must match on both ends. If you are trying to control display using serial, the driver uses the default settings from the manufacturer. Some drivers show you the default settings when you add them into your system. Crestron generic one-way serial driver will also show the driver settings here. For drivers that do not show the serial settings, there is a way to manually get the information. If you download the driver and open the file in a text editor, you can verify the baud rate. You cannot adjust the serial settings for AV framework drivers. Consult the product documentation from the manufacturer to make sure that the settings match. Some serial drivers have a test button which will allow you to test your driver by sending commands. For IR control, all IR commands are tested and verified before being added to the Crestron driver. So if you are experiencing issues, check that you chose the appropriate IR emitter port in AV Framework. In this example, we used IR port 1 and 2 on our control system. Proper placement of the IR emitter over the controlled device is also important. You must also verify that you're using an IR driver that is compatible with the device model you need to control. AV Framework will send out the commands when the appropriate button is pushed on the user interface. For example, we added an LG BDP series Blu-ray player into the system. You can go to the user interface and press any of the auto-generated buttons for the device, which will send out the IR commands. Video and audio issues can be investigated by logging into the web UI of the device itself, if available, and by checking the cables. With some devices, you may be able to access the video settings directly in the same web interface, and in others, you may need to navigate to a separate interface. In a device web interface, a different EDID template may need to be selected to be compatible with the sources in the system. You should also check the input and output paths of your video and audio. As we can see here, video and audio are being detected in the inputs of the DMPS Lite switcher that has built-in AV Framework functionality. If we select the output, we can see the video is also being sent through the output, and a display is being detected. Remember to make sure that the video is routed correctly in the user interface and that the output is enabled in the device. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for more videos from CTI.